widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask questions, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country at heart. Because we can't achieve greatness without national unity, without stability, without cohesion. It is time for us to remember an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman because elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman because elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the quality leadership. Nigeria's next leaders should be people who possess a combination of intellectual depth, a mindset capable of philosophical reflection, and the practical ability to inspire, motivate, and guide our citizens. We must elect a leader with a globalized mind. Globalization has drivers and passengers. Right now, Nigerians are passengers in the train of globalization. It is time to look into a new generation of younger technocratic minds that can solve practical problems of nation building, joblessness, widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask questions, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country. Because we can't achieve greatness without national unity, without stability, without cohesion. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity to deliver. Quality leadership. Nigeria's next leaders should be people who possess a combination of intellectual depth, a mindset capable of philosophical reflection, and the practical ability to inspire, motivate, and guide our citizens. We must elect a leader with a globalized mind. Globalization has drivers and passengers. Right now, Nigerians are passengers in the train of globalization. It is time to look into a new generation of younger technocratic minds that can solve practical problems of nation building, joblessness, widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask questions, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country at heart. Because we can't achieve greatness without national unity, without stability, without cohesion. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity to deliver. Quality leadership. Nigeria's next leaders should be people who possess a combination of intellectual depth, a mindset capable of philosophical reflection, and the practical ability to inspire, motivate, and guide our citizens. We must elect a leader with a globalized mind. Globalization has drivers and passengers. Right now, Nigerians are passengers in the train of globalization. It is time to look into a new generation of younger technocratic minds that can solve practical problems of nation building, joblessness, widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask questions, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country at heart. Because we can't achieve greatness without national unity, without stability, without cohesion. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity to deliver. Quality leadership. Nigeria's next leaders should be people who possess a combination of intellectual depth, a mindset capable of philosophical reflection, and the practical ability to inspire, motivate, and guide our citizens. We must elect a leader with a globalized mind. Globalization has drivers and passengers. Right now, Nigerians are passengers in the train of globalization. It is time to look into a new generation of younger technocratic minds that can solve practical problems of nation building, joblessness, widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask questions, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country at heart. Because we can't achieve greatness without national unity, without stability, without cohesion. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity to deliver.
Welcome our viewers. We are still waiting for our guests to join us. So once our guests join us, we will start the program. Thank you.
Quality leadership. Nigeria's next leaders should be people who possess a combination of intellectual depth, a mindset capable of philosophical and the practical ability to motivate and guide our citizens. We must elect a leader with a globalized mind. Globalization has drivers and passengers. Right now, Nigerians are in the train of globalization. It is time to look into a new generation of younger technocratic minds that can solve practical problems of nation building, joblessness, widespread poverty, and weak institutions. It is time to start educating young people in order to break cycles of intergenerational poverty. It is time to empower the citizens to ask, demand answers, and vote out non-accountable governments. It is time for us to unite beyond tribe and religion and elect a true leader who has the interest of the country at heart. Because we can't achieve greatness without stability. Remember, an ineffective government is a reflection of an ineffective man or woman elected to a responsibility that he or she lacks the capacity to deliver.
Good evening, sir.
Oh, good evening. Yeah, good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you tonight. You're highly welcome.
Thank you.
If you kindly adjust your video a little so that your head will come down so that when on YouTube, it wouldn't have to, exactly. Yes. Yes. Okay. No. Okay. That's fine.
Like this?
Yes, exactly. That's good.
All right. Okay. All right. Very good. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, dear viewers, a very good evening to you and welcome to Lumba Television. This is Angel Lady, and today we have yet another interesting session on Lumba Television. And of course, to discuss this with us, we've got an distinguished guest, and he is none other than Kingsley Chiedu Moghalu, Nigerian presidential candidate 2019. He is also a political economist and a lawyer and former United Nations official. And well, the topic of discussion for today is the NSAS protest and the way forward for the political class. You're welcome once again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
It's
very
really
much.
an honor to have you.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll quickly hit the road without much further ado. So let's see. The protest has been on. The protest was on for about 2 weeks thereabout before it eventually came to an end or some sort of suspension or pause. And so far, we see a lot of things happening in Nigeria. What do you think is the way forward for the political class?
Well, I speak.
So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. All right.
I can hear you as well.
Yeah. I hope. Well, I know that. I think that what is happening in Nigeria is a really historical moment. And I think it's an important time, a watershed moment where Nigeria's leaders should reflect very carefully on what led to this uprising by the young people of our country. I think they had a lot of frustrations, a lot of hopes, and I think there is a very important duty, a pressing duty on the leadership of Nigeria to understand and begin to apply the concept of intergenerational equity. And that is this, that the future of Nigeria belongs to the youth, who make up more than 60% of our population. And because of that fact, they count, they matter, their voices should be heard, and public policy should target them in terms of expanding their opportunities with jobs, with education, with skills, and with opportunities for entrepreneurship and so on, and promoting those among them who have very unique abilities. So I think this is a moment of reckoning. Going forward, what should happen? The protests had some specific demands made of the government. 5 of them, I think, in the first instance, and a number of others. Release of all those arrested, compensation, psychological retraining, and other types of training for the police. I think that the first thing the government must do to restore trust, which seems to have been broken, is to make sure that these 5 initial demands are actually executed, that those demands are met, and with a time frame to meet them. That's what I think. The government should come out with a program with a time frame attached to it to meet those 5 specific demands. And beyond that, I think the government should consider other demands in terms of broader governance reforms, because NSAS is really a metaphor. It's a metaphor for a lot of things that have gone wrong in our country. And I think we really need to look inwards and reposition Nigeria for greatness, for effective governance, and to be able to meet the basic aspirations of its citizens, security and their welfare.
Thank you so much for that one, people. This is Lumba Television, and today we have one erudite personality right here with us. He is none other than former presidential candidate, that is 2019 presidential candidate, and he is here. He is none other than Kingsley Chiedu, Nigerian presidential candidate for 2019, and he's a political economist, a lawyer, former United Nations official. And the topic of discussion today is the NSAS protests and why and the way forward for the political class. Of course, this is a Lumba Television, and our tradition is we do ask questions, and of course, you have the privilege to ask your questions. However, you will be called on. I see your hand already, but hang on a moment. Let's take Mr. Dan. I'm sure Mr. Daniel has questions as well.
Yes, Chief, we are happy to have you here. You've been at the very top echelon of the Nigerian governance. You are the former deputy governor of the central bank. A lot of people say that what's happening with NSAS is merely frustration that's been building up even since independence. I don't know whether you share that opinion, and if you do, to what extent is the previous government, apart from this present one, share culpability for what is going on at the moment?
Yes, I believe that this is really, the eruption of pent-up frustration. But the tipping point of it was the police brutality that young people suffered at the hands of the SARS unit of the Nigerian police force. So yes, I do agree that it's an eruption of pent-up frustrations. And this has been building for a long time. It's not just now. It's not just under the present government. Other governments in the past have also a role to play in the situation in which we find Nigeria today. No question about it. However, in the past 5 years, it does seem that the economy has gotten so much worse. We've had recessions. There's an oil price crash. It could be just a question of unfortunate timing, but also there are issues of the capacity to respond to economic challenges that people have raised. So yes, while the government of the day has to be held accountable by the people who are protesting, but it is a historical fact that governance in Nigeria has not been what it should be. Nigeria simply has not met its potential. I think everybody knows that. And I think there's something to be said for, even other governments before this one. However, the situation is now, and the government in power now has to deal with it.
Okay, the last person we interviewed on this similar topic is Ismail Ahmad, a senior special assistant to President Buhari on social investment programs. We put to him that people believe that the present administration, she has greater responsibility for what is happening now. And then he gave us a lot of list of social investment programs of this administration, trader money, farmer money, and all those. And do you think that those efforts by this administration has tackled the problem of poverty alleviation in Nigeria?
I certainly do not think that those programs have tackled the foundational and fundamental problem of poverty in Nigeria. If they had effectively tackled those problems, we would not be seeing the rage that we have seen in the streets recently. Look at people looting warehouses of COVID materials. Why were those COVID materials there and had not been shared during the peak of the COVID crisis from March to July or August? So the facts speak for themselves. There's something in law we call res ipsa loquitur, so that's the reality. So I think, while the intention of some of those programs obviously is good, but the execution and the impact, I think, it's this capacity to execute public policy, to frame public policy and execute it in a manner that is transformational, that appears to be in question. So yes, there are programs that exist, but how many people are they reaching? Are they reaching people who deserve them all over the country? Is there corruption involved in some of these things? That's the problem. So we know the official existence of programs to alleviate poverty, but there's even a problem in terms of the concept itself. I don't believe that you can solve the problem of poverty with handouts. I don't think you can. And that's where the government of the day seems to have gotten it wrong. Going around in the market and sharing money to people, 10K, 20K, those things will never transform anybody's life. That's just the truth. What people need is not a handout, but a hand up. structural investment in the capacity of people. What kind of education they have? What kind of skills do they have? And when they graduate from schools, how equipped are they to be useful to themselves in terms of new businesses or industries or all sorts of things? And is the government or the private sector able, has an enabling environment be created for the private sector to be able to bring the capital that is needed for these young people to start their lives and be productive in the Nigerian economy? This is the real question. So I have always felt that rather than all these programs that are so many of them, there should be a very carefully designed program to bring capital to young people. And I call for equity capital. And before I even proceed, I want to say that in my own concept, it's not the government that should be doing those things. The government can invest, for example, in a super venture capital fund run by the private sector that can then invest in new businesses by new young unemployed youth to help them start a new life. So it's not credit and it's not a dash. You invest the money in a new business, the venture capital firm will own some of the equity of that business, and that holds the person who has received that investment accountable. That's to make sure that public funds are not being wasted or private investors' funds are not being wasted. There's a problem in Nigeria. Anytime the government announces some program of funds, people think it's free money and that they have an entitlement to try and get their share. This doesn't solve the problem. So you can distribute a lot of money, but it doesn't address the real issue. People take the money, but they don't do what they're supposed to do with it, and they're not held accountable. So at the end of the day, poverty is not being alleviated in any serious way because there's no production coming from that program. It is the productivity of the economy that will do away with poverty, not government handouts to people who are supposedly poor. So that's there's a conceptual issue. And so the approach, I think, could be much, much better than what it has been.
Well, it appears you have kind of moved ahead of me in giving it's fine giving some sort of solution, because
yes,
that is where my mind would have been going. Okay, yes. We have seen what the government has done.
Yes,
all these approach to poverty alleviation, even before this present, exactly, even this before this present government, the previous governments have always made those noise. Yeah. About poverty alleviation. When I was a young man, even the Bangladesh administration have their concept of MAMSA and all those things. And yet, here we are. Yes. So my next question would have been, what different approach would you have adopted had you won the last presidential election?
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yes.
That the first issue is a conceptual issue. We need to learn to think deeply and not just act for public applause, which is what happens with many of our political leaders. We don't think deeply about societal problems and how to solve them. We don't always place the capable people, people who have the capacity to actually conceptualize and execute these programs. They're not necessarily the ones who are in charge of many of these efforts. So that's also a fact. So there isn't objectivity in a lot of these things. They're just political. Everything is politicized. We can just enumerate the programs we have set up, and that may be a political statement, but it doesn't change anything on the ground. There are 100 million Nigerians who are living in absolute poverty. That's 50% of Nigeria's population. And Nigeria is the country with the highest rate of absolute poverty in the world. And that's why we now say we are the poverty capital of the world. How do you address poverty? You address it with structural change. You don't address it with populist rhetoric. You don't address it with quasi-socialist approaches. No, you think conceptually. I don't believe in poverty eradication. I believe in wealth creation. What do you do to help young people and new generations build up good income for themselves that takes them out of the poverty line into the middle class? China did it. Over 40 years, they've taken 800 million, 7 to 800 million people out of poverty into the middle class. We should study these kinds of lessons and adapt them to our own environment. And I come from the point of view of, you know, a market-based approach with some government public policy support. For example, if, as I was recommending when I ran for president, that if I were to be elected, we would set up a 1 trillion naira venture capital fund. I said that the government would simply invest in this fund and not the whole 1 trillion, 500 billion. Then the private sector will bring the remaining 500 billion, and we have the private sector, we set up parameters for how this fund will be used and have a private sector venture capitalist firm manage the fund with parameters that make sure that objectively this venture capital fund can actually assist people from all over the country. But if, for example, you set up a government program and you go to one part of the country and they tell you they've never heard of it, they only hear of it on television, that it is only being given out in a certain part of the country or in some other parts of the country. When you begin to hear these kinds of allegations, it's because politics has crept into the matter. Some people are not making the right decisions. So that's the difference, you know, between my vision and the way I would do these things and what I see happening now. It's like night and day. From my own standpoint, the conceptual beginning, the conceptual point of departure in this current situation we have now and with these programs is faulty. No question in my mind about it. And that's why it's not working.
Thank you very much, sir. You see, what you've just said about the attitudinal approach to the problem,
yes,
easily leads into this concept of warehousing palliative goods.
yes.
And we have seen the warehouses being looted now. I was speaking to a minister in this administration this morning. He was kind of absolving the federal government of culpability in this, because people are asking, why are these goods there? And my question is, why wouldn't, is that approach correct, by the way? Buying foodstuffs and storing them
Exactly.
in the name of,
Exactly.
so what do you think about that? Is that the correct approach to help people? Because I live in the UK. Let me not say what we are doing here, but because they will just say, okay, that is UK. But what do you think? That approach of buying foodstuffs and storing them in warehouses?
It is actually not the right approach. It is an approach that leads to corruption or creates an incentive for corruption. Some people down the chain. And when I make my critique about governance, I want to be very clear. It's not focused just on the federal government. It is, we have a challenge of governance across the country. In many, many states of the Federation. Some states do better than some other states, maybe, but even at the state level, even at the local government level in Nigeria, because there is a culture of corruption that has eaten very deep into the fabric of the Nigerian polity. That's the issue. And that is not any particular person's franchise. You know, the system as it is, the system has been created in such a way that there's a lot of incentive for this kind of corruption. So when you say you're buying palliatives and you're storing them in a warehouse, you said that if you say in the UK, they will say it's the UK. What's wrong with being as effective and efficient as the United Kingdom or as the USA in meeting the responsibility of government to the citizens, as has happened in the COVID crisis? Every government has had to support its citizens and its businesses. Many governments that are even supposedly capitalist, the government has had to, in America, the government is sending out checks or has sent out checks, you know, $1,200 checks to millions of Americans. So if the American government were buying food and telling millions of Americans that the food will be distributed to them, do you think it would have worked? I don't think it would have worked. Does the government have the kind of data on its citizens? Why don't you use the telephone? Everybody in Nigeria has a cell phone. It's an easy, it's the database from which we should start everything.
That will have led to my my next question, sir, because
it looks like I'm always ahead of your question.
Because there is the issue of data collection.
Exactly.
In the UK, for instance, okay, let me just give this example, and then because a lot of people are watching this program, and people are always, yes, even in YouTube now and on Facebook. In the UK now, if you are self-employed, for instance, the government will simply send you an email. This program is starting in the next 2 weeks.
That's
you
right.
don't have to do anything. We already have their data. If you qualify, simply go here, apply to say, I'm interested.
Exactly.
3 days, money in your account. What you are entitled.
Exactly. That's the approach. That's the approach we should be moving to in Nigeria.
But what is the data? How can we do that in Nigeria without data?
That's why we have to fix the data problem. That's why the national identity management system needs to be made robust. Let me tell you, I was a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And because of this problem with data, with identity management, that's how I led the team after we had agreed as a leadership group under Governor Sanusi. But I was deputy governor for operations at that time. And I was directly in charge of the team that created the BVN, the bank verification number, because we said, look, as a central bank, we are frustrated with this question of data and unique identity management in Nigeria. At that time, it was not really going very well. So we said, but within the banking system, which is under our total control as the regulator, within the payments system, which is under our complete control as the regulator, we are going to make sure that every Nigerian is uniquely identified and that you cannot do anything in the financial system without that unique identification. That's how we came out with the bank verification number, BVN. I played a direct leadership role in that innovation. So we have solved this problem in a particular space in Nigeria, and we can expand that innovation across, even beyond the financial system. If the government and other institutions were to be interested, we could apply it to voting. We could apply it to things like this relief issue and so many other things. Even if you don't capture everybody, then let there be a few people who may not be captured by that data. Then you can go to the villages and you can do this type of sharing. But you cannot take this type of approach just to millions of people in a country and expect it to work. That's why we're where we are today. So the problem of data is important, because without data, you cannot plan effectively. Without data, you're not going to be able to run an effective public policy that meets the needs of your citizens. Without data, you're not even going to be able to collect tax effectively. What do we have today in Nigeria? Many Nigerians do not pay tax. Why? Because they don't trust the government to use their money, to provide health services, education services the way they ought to. So there is no social contract. There's a breakdown of what is supposed to be the social contract. And that is what has led to these types of eruptions that we are now seeing. Because as poverty increases, people just become very uncomfortable. And at a certain point, they're just not able to contain themselves anymore. So we need to go to the root of the problem. We have to reestablish the social contract so that citizens pay taxes. There are 70 million Nigerians who ought to be paying tax in the tax bill, but only about 10 million of them do, from the data that I am, privy to, So, and so we have one of the lowest ratios of taxation or tax to GDP. How much of our gross domestic product comes from taxation? It's just about 6% in Nigeria, and that's one of the lowest in Africa, one of the lowest in the world. And any government that is not able to, I'm not talking about increasing taxes. No, hear me very well. Or as the American politicians will say, read my lips. No high taxes. Just expand the numbers that are paying tax with a low tax base, and you will see the government in a better fiscal position. Because they are unable to do that, they are borrowing a lot of money and mortgaging the future of these very young people. And we know that he who goes a borrowing goes a sorrowing. There are two visions of the youth that I always use when I speak, in public places, and they're very sharp and different. One is what Benjamin Disraeli, the former prime minister of Britain, said, that, quote, the youth are the guarantee of a nation's posterity. The future of any nation belongs to those who are young today. So you must prioritize them. The other vision is a vision, put out by Herbert Hoover, the 31st president of the United States. And he was sarcastic when he said it. He said, quote, "Blessed are the young people, for they shall inherit the national debt." So the question is, what is applying to Nigeria today? It seems to be Herbert Hoover's vision that seems to be that's what's playing out in Nigeria today, not Benjamin Disraeli's vision. So we have work to do, serious work.
We thank you very much. To remind our guests, we have Chief Kingsley Moghalu, former deputy governor.
Hello, Daniel. Hold on. I'm not a chief.
Okay.
Please, don't promote me. I'm only a humble professor.
Okay. Yes. Okay. We have Professor Kingsley Moghalu, former deputy governor of the Nigerian Central Bank, a former presidential aspirant in the last presidential election in Nigeria, with us today. And the issue under discussion is the End SARS protest and the subsequent looting of national resources and attack on politicians going on. What should they do to get out of this present crisis? So let's go back, sir, to the End SARS protest we are having. With specific 5-point demand.
Yes.
This administration immediately said, yes, I accepted the demands, I will implement it.
Yes.
Do you think the approach taken by this administration to respond to that burden crisis at that point, when it can still be contained, why did it not work? And what should they have done in your own opinion?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I was not a presidential aspirant. I was a presidential...
presidential candidate. I always make that mistake. I apologize. Presidential candidate.
Yes, for the record. Yeah, but talking about the 5-point demands of the protesters, you see, there's something that happens a lot in Nigeria. Political leaders always think they can patronize the youth. They always think they can treat them with a certain amount of condescension and just wave them away so that they stop complaining, you see? And that's what cannot work this time around from what we have seen. The young people were very organized. I think we saw that, and they're very serious. And so making those promises is not enough. It is coming out with a program to make sure that those demands are met with a timeline. That is very important. And what is the quality assurance? What is the system set up to verify that these reforms have been done and done effectively? That's the point. It's not just about quantity. We have to think about quality. That's what is causing the problem. So I think that the federal government needs to undertake a comprehensive review of the Nigerian police force and a comprehensive reform. The culture of corruption has eaten into the Nigerian police force. We know it. We have heard allegations or stories or reports that even the SARS itself was a monument to corruption. Young people who have been accosted by SARS talk about how they're beaten up, taken to their ATM to withdraw money and give to the SARS officials. We've heard stories about, the take, how what is collected at police checkpoints or by SARS is passed on up the chain. So these are there's a systemic rot that needs to be looked at. So it's not enough to just come out and say, I assure you, your demands will be met. And then everybody will stop protest and go away and nothing fundamental changes. Here's how we need to go about police reform. First of all, there has to be, again, I always talk about the concept. But the problem we have in Nigeria, Nigerians are also part of their problem. We are part of our own problem in Nigeria. Why? Because we set expectations very low. We do not like people who are thinkers. We don't like to think. We just accept, we want action, running around, pretending to be doing something, activity, motion without real movement. That's what we have in Nigeria, because there is no deep thinking. If you think deeply and reflect and you talk about concepts and ideas, Nigerians will say, that man is blowing grammar. And that's why Nigerians are their own worst enemies. Go and look at all the countries in the world that are making progress. They are led by people blowing grammar, quote unquote. Whether it's in the United States or in Europe, Angela Merkel in Germany is a PhD, physics, go to France, Macron, an investment banker, a diplomat, go to Ghana, a lawyer, an economist, go to wherever, go to South Africa. So ideas matter. That's the first change we are Nigerians, all of us, 200 million of us, must make in our mindset. So how do we deal with police reform? We deal with police reform by a foundational concept and redesign of policing in Nigeria. First, we must understand that a country of 200 million people simply cannot have a police force of 350,000. That is statistically a joke. It tells you there is no police or policing in such a country. 350,000 police people cannot secure a country of 200 million. And I called when I was running for president, and I said that if I had won, that I would have built the police force up to 1.5 million men and women. Not just recruiting people anyhow from the streets, although that would provide employment to at least 1 million people who are looking for jobs today, 1 million out of the many millions. So that's also something for us to remember. But the foundational thing is, what is the priority we have attached to security? Have we budgeted for police reform? And if so, how have we made sure that whatever budget we put out for these recruitments or police reforms will not be stolen by corrupt officials? So you must first manage that risk before you begin to proceed. Otherwise, you will fall into the same problem that we've always had. You see what I'm saying? So when you manage this risk or create a framework for risk management to make sure that these reforms, the risk of these reforms going left-handed doesn't arise or is managed in advance, then you start with recruitment. The recruitments to the police force have to be far more professionalized. Not as we have today, very haphazard from what we can see, and used as political favors, to pay political favors to particular geographic zones or to particular traditional rulers or to particular interests of different types. You can't recruit a police force that way. There should be a standard, and it should be a high standard. And anybody aspiring to get into the police force who doesn't meet those standards simply cannot get in, period. Any institution, public institution, where people can just walk in because they know somebody and somebody made a phone call, you just know that you're setting up what we have just had and seen in Nigeria. So that's number one. The recruitment has to be professionalized. Then training. Many people know me as a former deputy governor of the central bank, and more lately as somebody who is in the business of transformation. I am a transformation agent. I'm not a career politician. I don't consider myself a career politician, But earlier in my professional career, I spent 17 years in the United Nations, building, rebuilding, and repositioning failed or failing countries. Cambodia, Angola, Somalia, the former Yugoslavia, Croatia specifically, and Rwanda. I served at the UN headquarters in New York and also in some of these countries on the field, especially in Cambodia, in Croatia, and in Rwanda and Tanzania. And one of the things I did very early in my career when I joined the UN, I was a human rights officer for the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC. The UN governed Cambodia for the first 1 year after its civil war. The UN brokered the peace accords and then was in charge of the government to prepare the indigents of Cambodia to take over the running of their country. And so I was in human rights and elections. I was a human rights officer and I was an elections officer. So I did a lot of human rights training of the Cambodian police. I did a lot of human rights training of Cambodian judges. I did a lot of human rights training of the Cambodian military. And then at the end, I was part of the organization of the elections. So this was a process that took a year. So it's not something you can just come and do tomorrow morning and walk away and say you have trained Nigerian police. Their mindset needs a foundational overhaul. So, and the police themselves are also victims of the system we have erected in Nigeria. So, recruitment, training has to be professional, including training in human rights. And then along that, you must set up an independent accountability mechanism to check police brutality. If a police officer is arraigned before an independent body that, makes sure that police do not go around shooting the citizens they're supposed to protect, which is what SARS was busy doing. But was there any accountability? No, there is no culture of accountability in our public institutions. These are the reforms. Then in organizing the police force, you have to say, are they specialized? There has to be specialization in the police. Some people have to be in charge of forensics. Some people are in charge of economic crimes and economic investigations. Some people are in charge of armed robbery, these kinds of things. But in Nigeria, any policeman can do anything. That's not right. So you have to specialize. Then you have to provide a kind of equipment that is advanced, that makes the police effective. Do we have forensics laboratories in every state of the Federation? The answer is obviously no, but there ought to be. So these are the kinds of reforms. And then finally, should the police just be a federal institution? No, you must bring policing down to the people. So you have to have community police, and this is now part of the argument or discussion on constitutional restructuring. So policing should be a local function. It's not a federal function. You can have a few, a police force that works on the federal capital, Abuja, or protects federal facilities around the country, the federal police. But every region of the country in a constitutionally restructured Nigeria should have its own police force. So this is the approach. So for the particular demands that the protesters have put forward, like I said, the government has to come out with a timetable and a quality control mechanism, an audit to see what the problem is. You can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. You've got to identify the problem clearly and then advance a solution and then execute the solution and then have the political will to follow through with that decision. All these things are not part of your everyday approach to governance in Nigeria. And that's how we need to do things differently.
We thank you very much. I wouldn't want to monopolize questions. So Angel, I don't know whether you have
yeah, I do have a question. Like you did mention corruption being a major problem in Nigeria. What's the easiest way for corruption to be managed or stopped or brought to minimal visibility in Nigeria?
Yes, now here's my take on corruption. To fight corruption successfully, you need to go back to its root. Are there any perfect human beings? No. Even in Western societies, there is corruption, but it is marginal. It is not at the center, it's at the periphery. In Nigeria, corruption is at the core of what we call the public sector or governance. So how do you address this type of systemic problem? You take a number of approaches. Number one is that accountability, impartial accountability is important. But even before then, you have to address the value system problem. So Nigeria's problems are multi-layered and they're all interlinked. The educational system in Nigeria, does it teach effectively from primary school to secondary school a value system of ethics? I had said when I ran for president that ethics will become a compulsory subject from primary to secondary schools. Children have to be taught what's right and what is wrong. If you don't begin from this foundation, they come out, they grow up seeing everybody corrupt, and they will also become corrupt themselves because they can see that it doesn't really matter. Everybody's doing it. So the foundations, the kind of solutions I come with are foundational solutions. I don't like scratching the surface of problems and pretending to be solving a problem and doing nothing. That's not my approach to leadership or governance. So we have to start with this question of the value system in Nigeria and how we begin to train our young people to have a set of values. That's number one. Number two is that you use technology to fight corruption. When we were in the central bank, one of the reasons we introduced mobile banking and mobile payment services, where you can bank with your phone, you can bank by POS machines, you can bank with ATMs and do all sorts of transfers, was also to tackle the problem of corruption. But we met a lot of resistance. Nevertheless, we were able to push through those reforms because the central bank had independence. The bank was legally, under statute, independent of external influence. And so because it had a team that was dedicated, led at that time by Lamido Sanusi, and I was one of the deputy governors, we all worked as a leadership team. We envisioned, we executed without fail. We saved several banks from collapse. I was also deputy governor in charge of the banking sector reform. We saved banks, stabilized the banking system. Otherwise, a lot of banks would have collapsed after the global financial crisis of 2008. So we changed the payment systems, and partly also to make payments more efficient, and also partly to reduce corruption. Now, while we were doing this, a businessman who knows one of my in-laws sent a message to me and said, go and warn your brother, your in-law, Dr. Moghalu. This thing he's doing, what does he think? Does he think I can pay? I can't pay bribe with POS. I'm angry with these reforms. Tell him I said so. He should stop it. How does he expect us to pay bribes and carry our cash at night if he's making everything, electronic and all these kinds of things? He should watch it too. Do you see? This is a true story. Go and tell your in-law, I cannot pay bribe with POS, and therefore he's annoying me. So this is the issue. If you use electronic platforms that are more transparent and can track and trace financial transfers, then it is easier to manage corruption. I proposed, when I ran for president, that we should set up a database where you have the prices of every item under the sun. And any federal contract, or even any state contract, that is being awarded by the government must go through this system. The valuation for the contract has to be subjected to this test. If the contract or the prices of the items in the contract are more than 30% over what we know to be their market price. I mean, contractors are not NGOs. They're in business to make profit. So we know profit should be a reasonable profit, as it happens everywhere in the world, not awarding contracts that are 500 times their true value, so that the official awarding it and the person to whom it's awarded share the middle. That's corruption. But if you had this type of system, and I heard President Buhari announcing something that looks as if it is moving in this direction, but then the system itself was supposed to cost $1.something billion, or from what I heard. I was like, what is this? So, but even if, let's wink and look past that, if the system is set up and it works, then fine, maybe not too big a price to pay for a systemic control of corruption. So then the next thing you have with fighting corruption, apart from using an electronic platform that creates transparency, the next thing is the leadership. The leadership example is very important. If a leader holds himself or herself out as not being tolerant of corruption, it helps to send a message that corruption is not tolerated. But if a leader allows everybody around him or her to be corrupt and says that I am not corrupt, then that leader has not successfully fought corruption, and that's leadership failure. So there are several aspects, of fighting corruption. The leadership style, who are the people you keep around you? If a leader is known to keep friends who are corrupt, again, a subliminal message is sent that it's okay. This is the kind of guy I want to be, because if I become this kind of guy or this kind of lady, I'll be a friend of the president. The president likes people like this. Do you see what I'm saying? But if the president is known to hang out with professors, known to hang out with people of ideas, professionals, and businessmen who are genuine businessmen and women that you can trace where they started from and how they built their wealth, then that's a different message you're sending to the people. So these are the various aspects, the foundational value system training for the society, the matter of using transparent technology that improves transparency, the matter of impartial accountability, that if people are found guilty of corruption, they pay the price. If the people who are found guilty and pay the price often, if not always, but often happen to be people from other political parties, but not the ruling party, a message also is sent that this is a political approach to supposedly fighting corruption. So that's my take on corruption. It's not that easy. It's not that difficult to deal with, to be very frank with you. All it takes is political will and having the person with the right kind of understanding, conceptual understanding, in charge of these things, and you will see a difference.
Thank you so much for that response. Let's go back to the NSAS protests and their request. One of the requests of the protesters says they want e-voting. Of course, they came with the 5-5 agenda, and then eventually the list did grow on until we saw the e-voting system. Do you think Nigeria can actually come up with this e-voting and it will be successful, considering the fact that Nigeria is known for corruption?
Yes, indeed. I have advocated. I founded a group called To Build a Nation, TBAN, and one of our major advocacy campaigns is for an electronic and digital voting system. That's the only way you can curb vote rigging. Excuse me. That's the only way you can curb vote rigging in Nigerian elections in a very systemic manner. And in my own proposal, and we wrote a letter to the National Assembly, the Senate of the President of the Senate, with our proposal on electoral reform. That's TBAN, To Build a Nation. And we proposed electronic voting backed up with blockchain. Blockchain technology will go a long way to prevent, because even electronic systems can be rigged if you get hackers that are good enough. But with the blockchain technology, it becomes difficult to do so, because the blockchain technology distributes the function to so many people who can easily see what is going on. So this is the kind of innovative thinking that we should bring to governance in Nigeria. So yes, I do support electronic voting, and I think we should move in that direction before the 2023 elections, actually, which means we have 2021 to do all the heavy lifting that we need. And beyond that, we have seen, you talk about the demands expanding. I said at the beginning that NSAS is a metaphor for problems of governance in Nigeria, very foundational problems of governance in Nigeria, of which police brutality is only one reflection of those problems. It's a symptom, it's not a cause. So we have to go to root causes. The root cause, which we must tackle to prevent the national crisis or to contain the national crisis, is to move quickly into a discussion, a national discussion about the constitutional restructuring of Nigeria. That is what will solve the problem. You don't ignore the foundation and you're busy toying with the symptoms and you think it's going to produce anything markedly different.
Okay, sir. Now we have now looked around now. The failure of government to quickly move to arrest the situation have now led us to the situation where there is widespread looting around and criminality around the country.
Yes.
One of the questions I asked our last guest on this topic was, why did President Buhari found it difficult to make a symbolic gesture? Say, for instance, because if you say you're reforming the police, and you still have the people at the hierarchy who are part of the problem, exactly, you still expect them to reform the system.
Yeah,
we're asking how would it work? So if the president has said, would you agree that had the president said, okay, I'm sacking the Inspector General of Police, I'm sacking so and so AIG, I'm bringing in a new leadership structure to implement this proposal that you guys are requesting, do you think it would have worked? And why was it difficult for the president to do so?
You're not asking me to agree. I actually called for the Inspector General of Police to resign.
Yes.
As the first step in addressing the NSAS issue. The NSAS is something that's gone on for about 30 years, maybe even 40. and there have been problems all the way. So this is a system that has been built up over a long time. And the Inspector General of Police sits at the top of that system. It's a product of that larger system. So the first message you send is that the man himself, no disrespect to him personally,
Yes.
this is not about him personally. It's about a national, finding a solution to a national problem, should hand in his resignation in any moderately civilized country, civilized governance system, or accountable governance system. That is what would happen. The person who is in charge of the institution where this problem has exploded must take personal responsibility and humbly hand in a resignation. And if not, the president should say, I'm asking you to leave. So that would have instilled confidence that the president recognizes the depth of the problem and is sensitive to the feelings of these young people who have been brutalized for so many years. So yes, but it wasn't done. And this is a question of leadership style, leadership ability, leadership capacity, leadership skill. That's all I can say to that. Because leadership requires strength from within to take difficult decisions. But if you look at Nigeria and the governance of Nigeria, you see that we are very good at politics, but we are not very good at leadership. Politics and leadership are different things. Politics in a democracy is a competition, or should be a competition of visions and ideas that should place those competing, if they win, in leadership positions. And then what does leadership itself mean? Leadership is the ability to have a vision, to inspire the citizens, to mobilize them, and to motivate them into a certain direction of progress, measured over time. That is leadership, at least transformational leadership. I am a transformational leader. I believe in transformational leadership. That's what I believe, that's what I practice. So in every little corner that I have had the opportunity to lead and manage, I have done it so. The ability to take difficult decisions is a fundamental requirement of leadership. But in Nigeria, we admire the problem. That's all we do. We sit down and admire the problem. Oh, you cannot do this. If you do it, these people will be hurt. Oh, this constituency will be hurt. Oh, these people, oh no, I'll become quote unquote unpopular. Leadership is not always a popularity contest. You tested your popularity when you ran for election. Now that you have the responsibility to lead, you have to lead and make that ability to lead as part of your popularity, so that people can respect you and say, yes, that man or that woman, he can take a difficult decision. That's part of leadership. But I'm sorry, it's not what we have in a lot of places in Nigeria today.
Thank you so much for the response. Mr. Dandy, you still have a question, or we should take the question from Mr. Azubweze's.
Yes, go ahead. Call
All right, Mr. Azubweze, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Mr. Azubweze, are you there?
Yes, I unmuted myself, right?
Okay.
My name is Azubweze Ikejane. I think I'm old school, but we have a fundamental problem in Nigeria. And that fundamental problem rests on arrogance and foolishness. How could you tell me that someone who was arrested for a crime repented and is added into the security arms of that nation, and you expect him to perform right? It doesn't work. And secondly, how do you appoint just your family members as national security in a multi-ethnic country? That's very biased, and nobody will take it. They're even lucky that nobody went ahead. You read the story about Anwar Sadat, right? Nobody has gone ahead to do that kind of thing in Nigeria. And that's why they should think right, and govern the people right. Our legislators are misusing the funds. I'm aware of that. And it has run for years. Why would somebody go bury money in a burial ground or soccer pit, and that person is left without going to jail? It's only when you punish people for the ill that they do to the public that you begin to get reason in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
very
contribution.
much. Let's allow Prof to respond to the point raised by Mr.
Thank you very much. I got the second part of the question, but the first part, I'm sorry I missed it because I was temporarily distracted. Can I get that first part again, very briefly, so that I can
The
answer?
first part,
Yes.
I repeat.
Yes.
There were people arrested for some kind of crime. I don't want to define things. And then you release them, say they repented, and put them into the military, the police.
Okay, I see.
And you expect them to do right?
Yes, exactly. Okay, I get the picture. I get the question. Well, look, I share that concern that many Nigerians have, of the approach taken to the terrorists, of Boko Haram terrorists, which is what I believe you are referring to, and all these things we read about, that they have giving up their weapons and they're being indoctrinated and brought back into some of them being put in the security forces or whatever it is. I read some of these reports. I think that the government should be extremely careful. I believe we should be extremely careful and that this practice has to stop because first of all, there is a double standard. That's number one. There's a double standard because the way that a lot of these Boko Haram militants are being treated is not exactly the way that other dissidents in the Nigerian state are being treated. There are many people who are aggrieved against Nigeria for various reasons, and many of them are not even violent. Many of them they talk a lot and they say nasty things, but there's no proof that they're going around killing people the way that Boko Haram is doing. So we have to consider if you are treating such people as treasonous citizens, committing treason, and therefore their organizations are being proscribed and they're being banished and they're being, then make sure that you are doing the same thing across the board to anybody who is seen as a dissident of the Nigerian state. If you are treating people who are murdering Nigerian citizens in the Northeast, bombing our citizens, and you're treating those of them you capture with kid gloves, and then people who have not committed those level of crimes are being treated even more harshly, then you begin to have questions of legitimacy of the state. You begin to have, and that's one of the things we have today. There's a challenge to the legitimacy of the Nigerian state. There's a challenge to the legitimacy of the government, which the government has to go over and above to meet that challenge and prove its bona fides. So the second thing you talked about is nepotism. That's just, of course, it's a practice we have in many parts of our country and our democracy, that people come into public office and the first thing they do is to put all their family members, their friends, their cronies, their cousins. It applies that in many state governments around the country. It applies in the federal government. We've seen it. However, we've seen a much higher level of it in this particular democratic period since 2015 than we have seen in previous times. I think there's a heightened sensitivity to this, and I think it's something that we should know. Again, creates a problem of trust, creates a problem of legitimacy, creates a crisis of confidence. A government must not and probably will never be 100% effective in the performance of its duties. That's why there are elections, so that those who are competing with different and better ideas may win. But a government should never allow a fundamental crisis of its legitimacy to take place. And that's what's happening today. And that's very unfortunate. That's what I can say.
There is, Prof, there is something that worries me about the Nigeria system. If look at the situation in Nigeria now.
Yes.
Since Saturday, there have been widespread looting, even before the looting spread to Abuja and the northern Nigeria. In Anambra State, for instance, where I'm from, there has been this story that up to 20 police stations have been burnt.
Yes.
And then in Lagos on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, about 27 police stations were burned, a lot of infrastructure destroyed.
Yes.
And why is there no urgency on the part of government in addressing this. Again, I wouldn't fail to refer to the UK where I live. Yeah. If there is a situation of national emergency, they have this governmental institution called the COBRA. Yes. And every agency or government that may be related to managing the issue will be meeting every hour, every minute, brainstorming, inviting experts, brainstorming on how do we find a solution. Why is there no such urgency among the Nigerian leadership, like when there is a period of national emergency?
Well, I think all it reflects is the character of the Nigerian state and the capacity of those who lead the state at this time. I think, what we see on the streets, the mayhem, the looting, and nobody's checking them. The police, which was meant to stop this type of things, are not able to, but they're able to brutalize citizens that they're supposed to protect. The army is not able to stop these things, but they're able to, as we have had reported and alleged, shot civilian demonstrators or security agencies of the state. And these are extrajudicial killings and arbitrary executions. So it tells you, what then is the character of the state? Is the state, justified in demanding the loyalty of all its citizens when the maintenance of order, law and order in a proper and professional manner seems to be a problem, but they're able to shoot at peaceful protesters? It tells you everything you need to know. It's a very disturbing thing indeed. I don't think I have an answer other than to say that there's no capacity in the Nigerian state today.
All right, viewers and listeners, we'll soon be rounding up. This is meant to be a 60 minutes program, but it looks like we've only been here for 30 minutes, but it shouldn't run more than that. So before I ask my last question, I will give way to see whether Angel has any question.
I do have a question, although this time is going personal. Professor Shah, you at some point, that's in 2019, were a presidential candidate. 2023 is by the corner, and protesters are saying we need a change in leadership. What about you? Are you thinking of coming back to run for the presidential seats come 2023?
Thank you. That's a trick question, but I will answer it honestly. And that is that all my options are open. And I am, evaluating the situation. I always stand ready and available to serve our country. There's a passion in my heart for good governance. There's a passion in my heart for transformative leadership, and I'm available. That is what I would say. But running for an office depends on many things. It depends on the level of support you have. It depends on the level of financial support you also have. I'm not a career politician. I did not steal any money from Nigeria's treasury anywhere. If you know any money I've stolen, go and find it and come and put it on Elomba TV. So I did my work honestly in 5 years as a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And when I ran in 2019, because I did not run, I was on a third-party platform or an alternative platform. So many people in Nigeria, even though they liked the vision that I brought out, they were persuaded by my arguments, but they said to themselves, oh, but he's not likely to win because he's not in any of the two major political parties. I thank God that what has happened, one of the lessons we have to take out of EndSARS is that there has been a shift in this type of thinking. I ran in 2019 on the platform of the youth because I believed before it was fashionable. Now everybody talks about the youth, the youth. Before it was fashionable, I believed in the youth and their future. And I ran on a platform for working together with all of us to really create a different country. But at that time, even the youth themselves were not, they were still not ready. But EndSARS has changed a lot of thinking now, and the youth now have asserted their voice in Nigeria. And I believe that this will translate into the political arena as we go into 2023, without question. So at least it's not a good thing that anybody was shot, but let's try to turn opportunities and crisis into opportunity. That's what I think we should do. So, so because of the fact, because of the environment and the way people were thinking at that time, I did not get financial support for my candidacy, and a lot of it had to be done on my savings. That's a huge sacrifice to make for your country, to run for presidential office on the basis of your savings. I have children that are in schools that I have to pay their school fees. So why am I gambling? What is my first responsibility, which is to my children? And then people are not responding with financial support to the level that they say they want to see change. So these are all the things that will influence my decision, whether or not I will run in 2023. But like I said, all options are open. If one has support, if one has, when I say support, I mean political support, people who agree with the vision that I have shared, and also financial support. If people are prepared to crowdfund and support such a candidacy, why wouldn't I consider it?
Okay, Prof. My last question will be, even though you've touched it now, what are the positives we can take from this crisis of the past 3 weeks now, from these NSAS protests and the subsequent looting around the country? Are there any negatives we can take from it going forward?
Negatives or positives?
No, sorry, I said, sorry, positive. What are the positives you can take from it going forward?
I believe as painful as it has been, especially the loss of life, and I grieve and my sympathies are with any families that have lost lives in this crisis of the past 3 weeks. My heart goes out to them, and I'm really very sorry. But let their death not be in vain. That's what I would want out of this crisis. That out of this crisis, Nigeria opens a new chapter, in which governance is taken far more seriously, in which the youth themselves, having recognized their power and the power of their voice, should now be able to assert themselves in the search and selection of national leaders. So these are the kinds of positives that can come out of it, that the government itself listens and becomes more serious instead of trying to just, wish things away and continue with business as usual. Business as usual will not do. These are the kinds of positives that I believe have come out of this. I believe and I hope for a new day in our country out of this difficult crisis that we have seen.
Thank you so much. And let's take this one as our last question or submission before we call it a day. Mr. Azubweze, you have your hand raised up. Can you come in?
Yes. This is just a suggestion because we are good at talking too much. Right. Africans, Nigerians mostly, we just talk. This is the time to prepare the youth for 2023. Even if it's 2020 naira, 100 naira, there should be a PAC fund that the youth must establish to support any candidate that they want to vote for. It happened in this country. I could remember Obama's campaign. It's not that much, but collectively, it's a mighty fund. And with that, they can drive their cause. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, at this point, we'll call it a wrap. Mr. Dan, do you have anything further to say?
Yes, I would have loved the Prof to respond briefly to this point, this issue raised by Mr. Azubweze before we round up.
Oh, well, I think it's a very good suggestion. I tried to encourage such a thing in 2019, but it didn't really happen. So maybe this time around, and in doing so, I want to suggest something. Our youth should think deeply about who should lead this country and help and work, who they want to work with to create a new future. In doing so, we want new blood. That's very important. I believe that the old political class has had a lot of failures, and I think that is obvious to all of us. But it's not enough for people to be young when it comes to governance. There is a role in a struggle for each person and each kind of person. There's those who will march on the streets. There's those who will govern. There's those who will frame policy, all kinds of things. So when we are talking about leadership, I think we need to be very careful about what leadership in the context, for example, of a president means or a governor. Let's just take a president, for example. Leading a country is different, is a very different thing from governing a state. very fundamentally different. A state is very small relative to a country. Most of the time it's homogeneous. Managing homogeneity and managing the diversity of Nigeria they're two very different. One is like beans, one is like gari. Do you see what I'm saying? So you need people at the national leadership level who can manage diversity, who can manage the political crisis that Nigeria has faced because they have the capacity to manage diverse constituencies, diverse ethnic groups, diverse nations, diverse races, diverse tribes and tongues. That thing is a skill. It is not found easily in the marketplace, and it is learned. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to look at people who are the people who have those kinds of profiles. Number two, managing a country, a lot of national leadership at the level of a presidency has to do with the economy. That is to say, the national economy. Again, that's an important issue. How qualified are people you are supporting to manage Nigeria's economy? Number two. Number three, foreign affairs. The job of a president is to lead Nigeria's relationships with other nations. Do you support candidates or a candidate? Let's say candidates, because we're in a democracy. And I'm skeptical about the whole idea of always saying that everybody should come out with one candidate. It doesn't always work like that because it's a democracy. People may not agree on the choice of such a person. You understand what I'm saying? So there may be multiple candidates. It's possible. But what are the parameters against which we assess them? These are the things I'm trying to encourage our youth to think seriously about. Managing national diversity, managing the national economy, managing the international relations and foreign affairs of Nigeria. Again, it is something that comes with a certain level of experience. And then finally, the security of the country. That also is important. I think these four things are what you're looking for in a president. It's different from what you're looking for in a governor. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not necessarily the same thing. But in our country, we have certain, ways of thinking. Oh, you have to have been have you been a state governor? No, that's not how it works. The question is, do you have the experience relative to being the president of a country? And if you do have that experience, what is your track record of success in those types of assignments, whether at the national level or the international level or whatever? These are the kinds of things the presidency of a country is a very serious role, and we need to show that we understand what that role requires. We as voters, and we or those who are the youth who may be thinking about, creating a new path to the future. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much.
And beyond that, I'm so sorry. I have something more to say. I want to say something to the youth about this crisis. In the Arab Spring, in the Maghreb in 2011 or 2010 or something, there was a big uprising of the youth. But it did not, at the end of the day, despite the television cameras, despite the noise, despite the sound and the fury, it did not result in transformation across all the Arab states. In one or two places, it yielded results, including in Tunisia, for example, where actually it started. Why was this so? I'm saying this so that the lessons of the NSAS are not lost on the youth. There are three things the youth must do beyond the immediate crisis, because they must engage structurally with politics. No question about it. And a structural engagement with politics as we go towards 2023 involves three things. One, they must join political parties. They don't all have to be in one party. If majority of them want to be in one party, that's fine, but I'm just being practical. People will always have different persuasions. That's why it's a democracy. They must join political parties of their choice. They must vote. Voting is the most important thing. That's how you affect your future. The person you put as your local government councillor, as your governor, as your president, it is the character and the quality and the competence of that person that matters, perhaps even more than the party. But in Nigeria, as far back as recently as 2019, people were voting only on the basis of party. They have structure. They have this. This one can win. And sometimes the people you think will win fail. And you're back to square one. This is where we are today. So they must join political parties, they must vote, and third, they will have to run for office. But what we have seen with a lot of Nigerian youth is that the first thing they think about is running for office. But they have not shown, and they need to show, in my view, more interest in joining parties and in voting, and then running for office. But if you leave the first two, because of the not too young to run bill, and then you jump to running for office, you may elect a few young people, but they're not able to create a transformation of the system because they're so isolated in a sea of, much older politicians, much more career types of politicians and so on. So this is the lesson I wanted to talk about. And, join parties, vote, and then run for office. Because as I said before, you can run for your local government council, you can run for your governor and all that. But you see, when you begin to come, for example, to the presidency, the fact that you're young, the fact that you're 30 years or 35 years, does not necessarily mean that you can effectively be president of a country as big and complicated and challenged as Nigeria is. So have in mind all these things. In some European countries, we see them electing 30-something-year presidents and 40 years, and that's fine. And I'm not saying it can't happen in Nigeria. I'm sure it can. But remember that those countries have developed strong institutions over centuries. So it is easy for a well-motivated young man or woman to come. But if you're talking about Nigeria, you can have all the great intentions, but if you don't have experience that is relevant to the challenges of leading our country, even if you get there, you will find it very difficult to perform because Nigeria's institutions are still in their infancy. They are not independent, they are not developed. So we have not yet formed the kind of strong state that operates normally and functionally the way you find in Asia or Europe or America. So these are things to bear in mind. I'm just being practical in my thinking, and this is just advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate you for your time here, for coming around. Mr. Dan, I'm thinking you have nothing more to say?
Yes, no, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for being with us. It's been a very, very interesting evening. Very, 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 very erudite presentation that we believe will go a long way to develop the thinking of all our listeners and viewers tonight. Thank you very much, and you are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof, for showing up, for coming around. We appreciate your time here. And to everyone who's watching or who will watch this is Elumba Television, and we've had a professor right here with us, and he has talked so much about a lot of things. And of course, there are messages for you to take home. So as you watch this, do take home that message. It's very important. The topic we discussed today was the End SARS protest and the way forward for political class. Of course, we did go to other areas, and it was really educating. And I would say you follow our Instagram page, like our Facebook, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel that you are seeing this on. Subscribe so that you'll be the first to get information as they drop. Once again, thank you so much from